This week is All Saints Sunday, and I wanted to start the Rural Challenge by thinking a little bit about patronal festivals. Now, patronal festivals were something which were new to me when I moved into rural ministry, and what they are is that if your church building where your congregation meets has a saint which is associated with it, then at a special time each year, which might be their birthday, might be the anniversary of their death, might be some other sort of time, that there would be celebrations around that time. Now, these celebrations might be limited to some sort of special church service, which would be fine, but often in rural places patronal festivals are a bit more than that. Now, it might be that you just have a special church service where you think about your saint, and then you might just have like a bring and share meal, or you might have cake. One of the places where I worked at the patronal festival, we used to have a picnic, and people would cook food. The sausages were fantastic. We'd always have apple crumble for pudding, or some sort of crumble for pudding with ice cream, and there'd be a celebratory game of rounders. But it was part of the community of the church. It was an important thing to remember. So what is it that is important about that? Well, I think one of the big things which is important about that is remembering that we're part of a bigger history of being Christians, but also whatever your sort of biological family, everybody in the church community is related in the same way to their patronal saint. So it's someone who is part of everybody's family. Years ago, when we were thinking about all age services, one of the places I was working, we were thinking about what is it that everybody does cross-generationally? What are the things which binds everybody together, young or old? And we came up with the idea that the thing which everybody did and everybody knew about was singing happy birthday. So in our all age services once a month, we'd ask everybody who had a birthday that month, whatever age they were, to come up. They got a candle and we sang happy birthday to them. And in some ways, celebrating a patronal festival is celebrating the birthday or special day of someone who is a member of everybody's family, the church family, and that can be really, really good for us to celebrate together, to remember that we're part of something bigger, but also to remember that we are all bound together. This week is All Saints Sunday, and the Gospel reading that we have for All Saints this year is the reading of Lazarus being raised from the dead, and it's that bit of John 11, although if we want to read the whole of John 11, that's really good. And I always think about Jesus healing Lazarus, and what does that mean for us? Lazarus was dead, but Jesus brought him back to life. But the life that Jesus brought him back to was a human life, and that is one of the reasons why when we hear the story of Lazarus being brought back to life, he is still wrapped up in his grave clothes and has to be helped from them. So Jesus is there. When Jesus is resurrected, the grave clothes are left behind, but when Lazarus is brought back to life from his tomb, he has to be unwrapped, because Lazarus is being raised back to human life, and Lazarus will die again. When Jesus is raised into a resurrection body, and as Christians we believe that that will mean that all of us will become resurrected in a similar way to Jesus is resurrected, but Lazarus is brought back to human life, and he will die and be resurrected again. That's what we believe. And I think it's really interesting at All Saints to think, well, what do we really believe about the whole company of heaven? What is it that we really believe about the whole company of heaven? So I was brought up in a very evangelical church, and we didn't really think about the whole company of heaven. We just thought that as individuals, we were taught we turn to God, we'll go to heaven, and then that will be amazing, and there's no need to think about those that have passed on before, even though in the liturgy it talks about the whole company of heaven as well. But we were not, that was not our focus. In a very kind of Reformation way, we didn't really talk very much about the saints. We gave thanks for their teaching, for what they'd left behind, but there was no real understanding in the theology that I grew up with that we were joined up with everybody who had been Christians before us. And it's really interesting to think about that at All Saints. What do we understand about how we are joined up to everybody? How do we think about that? Maybe in the years since I've grown up, our understanding of time has changed as well. So actually, if we think about what heaven is, one of the ways to think about heaven is to think that we have, when we die, that we fall out of time. And so time is no longer constrains us. And so actually, where are we? What are we doing? I was brought up to be horrified at the thought of praying for people who had died. And to be fair, I do wonder still about praying for people who've died, because if we believe that they're with God in heaven, I'm not sure they really need praying for. They're there, they are in the space with God that we have in the visions. Our understanding of it often comes from Revelation. So I'm not sure I really want to pray for you. I don't feel that I want to pray for you. I give thanks for your life, but I don't necessarily want to pray for you. And then there's the challenge of, what about asking those people to pray for us? Now that would have been an entire anathema to the church where I grew up. How can you ask someone who has died to pray for you? Why would you even bother doing that? Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because theologically we believe that people are in heaven, and if they are someone that we might have asked to pray for us in one of those moments where we might not have felt capable to pray for ourselves, then we could ask them to pray for us. Because what is heaven apart from all that being close to God that we believe it brings? And there are certainly people alive at the moment who are around me where, when things are really difficult and I am struggling to pray, I ask them to pray for me. So how is that different? I still find it really hard to think about it. I think it's really complicated. But actually, what I do want us to think about this week is how we are all connected, how we are part of the great company of heaven of saints living and who are now in heaven. What is that like for us to be bound up with everybody, with everybody's family? It annoys me in church buildings where I'm leading a service and everybody sits at the back. Everybody sits at the back. And I could be quite away. I could be half a building away in some of our small churches from the nearest people that I'm preaching to. Often I walk to where the first person is. But recently I've wondered if people sit in those seats because their friends used to sit in the other seats and they don't want to sit there because they are remembering that their friend is worshipping with them too, and so they have left their seat in the church building. Maybe there's more understanding about the company of heaven than I really ever understood. The Dibley moment of the week this week is about something which happened a long time ago. Now, I am, as you have heard, a big fan of having a patronal festival where you can celebrate as a community and remember the patronal saint. But one of the villages where I have previously worked in 1822 managed to get their patronal festival celebrations banned by Act of Parliament because they were too riotous. There were too many hijinks happening. So yes, whilst I am all in favour of patronal festivals, please try not to get them banned by Act of Parliament because they're too riotous. Well, that's it for the Dibley Diaries for this week. I pray that you and your village, however large or small, have a really blessed week where your community feels connected to the company of heaven.